Welcome to another episode of the Base 718 Cayman story here on Forever Manual. My name is Mike Petrovsky. Quick disclaimer, within the next few minutes of this video you may see other people driving my car. That's not because I've sold it, but because I'm partially filming it myself. So I had to ask my friends for a favor of driving the Cayman for me, and what a surprise, they didn't say no. I bet you wouldn't refuse either. Now, when I was going through the reviews on Base 718 before ordering one, I was foremost interested in its engine's performance. Instead, I've been told a lot about how bad the sound was, and then everyone went straight to the praising the chassis. We will get to the noise it makes eventually, but for now, let me answer the main question. Does this 2-liter boxer motor produce enough power to bring 1400 kilograms to life? That's roughly 3100 pounds with me on board. The answer is yes. The engine produces decent amount of boost thanks to basically the same turbocharger, two of which were used to power late 991 Carrera. The pressure up to 1.4 bar, or roughly 20 psi, slightly higher than 2.5 engine produces in 718S. So the car not only makes plenty of mid-range torque, but it also has a funny, slightly old-school turbo character with nothing to offer at the low end. It revs well up to 7,500 RPM. You actually don't need rev it that high because the peak power is rated at 6,500. But anyway, the most exciting part is to get above 2,500 for that inspiring turbo pickup. It's not a kick really, but once the boost is there, you are being gently pressed into the seat and carried towards the next braking point. It's a good, powerful feeling. When it's already rolling, the 718 is definitely faster than the 981 Cayman with flat 6 engine of a larger capacity, and the mid-range acceleration is probably even better than on previous generation Cayman S. I saw my car pulling from the slow corners of the racetrack in a par with a modern 4-liter GT4 thanks to its torque. You just need a bit of time to get it going, really. I hope you guys are familiar with the concepts of boost threshold and turbo lag. In case of uncertainty in which is which and how they're different from one another, there is a link to the Engineering Explained video in the description section below. In short, the boost threshold is an engine RPM level where the engine produces enough of gas flow for the turbo to create the boost. And the turbo lag is a delay when above boost threshold between opening the throttle and receiving boost. Because obviously compressed air has many obstacles to deal with on its way to the combustion chamber. People tend to use the term turbo lag for labeling like all their boost related problems, but I want my explanation to be precise because the turbo lag, for example, at higher RPMs isn't that bad here. The throttle response is reasonable throughout the range, especially in the sport mode. However, the boost threshold is so high that it makes such a thing as blistering takeoff non-existent for a manual car. I was trying to time 0 to 100 at some point using a race logic device. It was reading nothing close to factory claimed 5.4 seconds, despite the 100 kph mark is being only one shift away. Yeah, if the grip is any good, and it usually is, there is no way for the engine to overcome it. You'll destroy the clutch sooner than you'll get a decent time. Actually, the wheel spin in winter would be your best season to enjoy straight line acceleration from standing still without hurting the car too much. But then nobody buys manual Porsche for drag racing. That's what the PDK is for. As soon as the engine reaches 2,500 RPM, the pace is generally there. And you are around or above that threshold pretty much all the time while driving. But getting there from standing still requires patience. And even more so if you want to accelerate, let's say, from 1,000 RPM while staying in top gear. The car always needs a couple of seconds to build up the boost. And it's not a unique problem of the base model. After I drove the more expensive manual Cayman S, with the clever variable turbo, I was surprised when it struggled to take off almost as badly. Driving around the city, you barely notice the difference between 2.0 and 2.5 engines. So basically the extra money for an S primarily buys you better top-end performance rather than enhanced everyday usability. Being a more serious machine, the S is slightly quieter, more humble. The base model tries to sound angry, as it's more about the experience rather than the performance. What fascinates me is how naturally the Base 718 fits into the urban environment, which is by default is quite restrictive for a sports car. And not just any urban environment. As the 2020 study conducted by TomTom Navigation shows, my hometown of Moscow tops the list of the world's most congested cities. So you get the idea. There's not much space to wrap the engine within city limits, so most of the time I enjoy the flexibility of the turbo. The sport mode helps, it's a great city mode actually. In addition to using more responsive throttle mapping, it works a little bit like an anti-lag system as well to help maintain the boost while the next gear is being selected. Yeah, so I can have a great time shifting through gears in a relaxed manner without falling out of the torque range. And a slightly higher idle speed at 1000 RPM helps moving the car in slow traffic more easily when using the clutch only. The car doesn't need to be particularly loud around here either. In fact, in some places it shouldn't be loud at all. Nevertheless, it sounds nice enough to fulfill the urge for a roar when there is a chance to floor it for a brief period of time. These moments are usually too short though for any disappointment in the Cayman's vocal abilities to kick in. You should know that it sounds differently from inside than outside, and the occupants don't get the best of it, unfortunately. The intake, the turbo, the auxiliaries, the meshing gearbox all together form this fat-free mix that dominates inside. It's complex but kind of flat, so the loud tire noise plays both drums and bass. And even if the artificial sound generator is on and droning, it doesn't make the scene any richer. It just covers all interesting details you may hear without it. So when you watch the video of your car passing by for the very first time, you get caught by surprise listening to the low and juicy rolling of the exhaust. You just don't hear your car this way even with the windows down. So yeah, 2-liter 718 does make a decent sound, which is available for everyone except you. The way it barks upon the cold start is joyful though, especially with the sports exhaust on. By the way, I heard that the Porsche sports exhaust won't be available for base 718s and T models starting from model year 2022 in some markets. And I had mine already changed under the warranty because of the rattling exhaust valve. And it still rattles every time one closes briefly at 2000 RPM. Okay, I agree that the 981 with naturally aspirated engines sounds better. But there is no real analog for it in the modern days. The noise regulations were totally different. By chasing this sound, you end up on the used car market, which is off topic today. Anyway, whilst lacking the sound experience, the Base 718 is a flexible car, which allows you to lay a quick path through the traffic without making a big deal out of it. No need for high revs, shift more often, fly quietly, and forget anything you've learned about the 718 with the help of a PDK gearbox. The long-geared manual transmission changes the experience entirely. The secret of happy city driving lies in your ability to remember about having a first gear. A gear you wouldn't normally consider using for overtaking. Yeah, learn how to rev match your engine and use first, because it goes up to 80 kph, it's almost 50 miles an hour. I hear people complaining about these extremely long ratios. Well, considering that it's the only way to pass the emission tests and keep the whole manual thing alive, I don't mind, to be honest. Plus, it's the heritage. Porsche has a long history of using tall gearing. They had the 4-speed gearbox on the racing cars of the early 80s. The first went up to 150 back then, over 90 miles an hour. You have to shift twice already to get there today, so stop complaining. Not every gear is that tall after all. I mean, of course you can do an entire lap of the racetrack in third, which goes up to 180 kph with an effective range exceeding 100. But the fourth, fifth and the sixth, actually they are geared quite closely. I would prefer the top gear to have a taller ratio, since the engine has to run already at 3000 RPM when the car is doing only 120 kph or 75 miles an hour, and it's only get noisier from then on. People get so scared of this gearbox, oh my god, like they must to spend an entire life on the second. Look, I'm cruising on sixth, doing just 80. That's 50 miles an hour, and just like I told you, I could be using second here, or first. But that would make me look stupid, wouldn't it? Just shift, alright? It's fun. I've got the GT4 short shifter installed as an experiment. It turned out to be a fantastic upgrade in combination with the standard cables. The point is that the shifter and the gearbox are linked differently in the GT4 and non-GT 718s. And this particular setup feels like a sweet spot, because it combines the best of both: shorter throws of a GT4 with lighter engagement actions of a base 718. The knob is lowered by 10 millimeters, placing my hand in a more logical position, and the self-centering spring is also slightly heavier, making the travel actions more positive, as well as the general wobbliness of the shifter less noticeable. The Cayman's manual is still far from being the best in terms of shifting quality, yet I absolutely recommend the GT4 short shifter to any manual Cayman owner, including buyers of 4.0 GTS. Actually, the only non-GT cars that have it from the factory are T models. By the way, after everything what I've done simplifying my Cayman, I started to appreciate the T models slightly more. I mean, still the base one gives you more freedom spec in your car, it has a better value when you start putting stuff into it, and makes more sense when fully loaded, but as long as you keep the T basic, it really stands out. I hope we'll have a chance to talk about that someday. Okay, but is there anything I don't like about my car? Well, just a couple of things, but one of them is big for a manual car. I'm not a fan of how the clutch works here. Although the clutch bites almost at the bottom, the pedal's treble is long and all of its range is functional. That's a typical Porsche thing, I totally get it. This time, however, they tried to make the clutch pedal more easy to live with by making it lighter, meaning you have to press it down with less effort. I don't mind that either, but there is a flip side to that coin. The counterforce, which provides you with feedback when the pedal gets released, is also lowered to a level, in fact, that makes the feedback at the end of the travel almost absent. You might think you've let it go completely, but you haven't just yet. And every time you overlap the pedals and step on the gas too early, the car gets jerky. And I stall it sometimes, even after 10 months of using. Mostly this happens while trying to move the car uphill, because the shitty hold function isn't always on when you need it. But it also happens on a flat surface due to the lack of the feedback from the clutch pedal. On the one hand, it's challenging because it makes me pay more attention to whatever I'm doing with my feet. That's useful. On the other hand, it's irritating because it's not an issue of me being a bad driver, but rather a problem of a compromising design. The second item in the list of things I don't like would be the air conditioning. This dual zone climate control is not one of those things that you touch once in a month. I have to adjust both the temperature and the flow according to the situation. It is far from being effective in the hot summer unless you set the vents blowing straight in your face. I usually avoid any direct flow and prefer the cabin to be filled with cool down mixture of well-distributed air, something that just doesn't occur on a hot day in here, despite the air conditioning running at high speeds. By the flow generated noise, you can tell that the cold air is being distributed in large quantities. But if you let it pass you by, it disappears somewhere behind your back, probably cooling down the hot luggage compartment. When it's raining, the windshield gets misted quite frequently. Yeah, you see the windows gets misted, which is also a sign of imperfect automatic climate control. But on a day like this, all you need is to stay warm, and the turbo engine has plenty of heat to spare for that. It warms up quickly, which is very convenient compared to 981, for example, which takes forever to warm up. And when parked outside, the hot air comes up from the mid-mountain engine, thereby keeping the cabin warm. The Cayman has more treats to warm up your heart during the cold season. Winter tires change the character of the Cayman in an interesting way. It not only becomes quieter and rides more comfortably, but its reactions to steering inputs become softer and more playful. Yeah, soft tire compounds make the Cayman to understeer more in tight corners if the speed isn't right. But if it is right, then it adds some yaw momentum after getting a grip almost in every corner, which I find very entertaining. And with a manual car, you have a little bit more freedom of controlling the understeering, because you always can disengage the clutch, remove excessive torque from the wheels, which is quite crucial at the beginning of the slip. The winter setup makes it even a better city car. In fact, the transformation is so appealing that it's difficult not to run the Cayman during the cold season. I know that the winter driving may affect the resale value in a bad way, but it adds so much to the understanding of the car, so I dare you to try. It's not about sporty driving or sheer speed, however, keeping the balance while the car is dancing on its toes on an icy surface is quite rewarding. Even the acceleration gets funnier, since the soft contact patch gets deformed every time when you increase the torque. So the unsettled nature of the turbo becomes even turbier, if there is a word. So yeah, thumbs up for winter driving. At the end of the day, this car isn't crazy fast, but it can be explored. I can take it to the track and really push it to the limit while staying within my personal boundaries. And when 300 horsepower sounds insufficient for you, just remind yourself that there is a Chinese version which has 50 horsepower less, and it's the best seller of the entire 718 range globally. So this one may be the cheapest, but definitely not the slowest. I was trying to explain the nature of my good relationship with the Cayman to a friend the other day, and I came to the conclusion that I just got lucky with this car. Without knowing that it's going to fit into my life for a fact, I have bought the Porsche which is perfectly suited for the circumstances we both have been placed into. I hope getting familiar with my experience will help you to find a perfect Porsche for yourself. If you want to hear more about the Base 718, please let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll see you next time.